Hello, and you're very welcome along to another RTÉ Rugby podcast. As we turn towards the Heineken Champions Cup, the new season is upon us. We'll also look back on some big games in the URC last weekend, but we also have some huge head coaching news in the world of rugby. The fallout from the Autumn Nations series is continuing. Eddie Jones is gone from England, Wayne Pivac is gone from Wales, and Warren Gatland is in. And we also have news as well. Ronan O'Gara is going to be staying in La Rochelle for another World Cup cycle. To talk through all of this, delighted to be joined by Bernard Jackman and Sean Cronin. Guys, thanks a million for joining.
Good morning.
No problem.
Sean, you're in the retirement stage now. You're back in with Mary's though in the All-Ireland League coaching and going all right. Another decent win at the weekend. You're sticking around with Buccaneers. Eddie O'Sullivan's Buccaneers. We had Eddie on last week. They're not getting too far away from you. You're sticking around there.
Eddie wasn't crowing too much about the win over us. No, look, it's going all right. It's a very competitive league. 1B, any team really under day could beat each other. So really enjoying it. Really good bunch of lads in there, and final game this weekend of this half of the season. So we'd like to finish well, and I suppose lads could enjoy their Christmas then and get going again in January.
Yeah, well, very best of luck with it. It's been going all right so far. We'll get straight into it, guys, because there's a lot to get through today. We'll start on the coaching front, though, because I said quite a fallout from the Autumn Nations series. It's I was going to say it's not often we would see this a year out from a World Cup. We just wouldn't see this a year out from the World Cup, but it shows probably the stakes that are on the line in the international game. Eddie Jones is gone from England. Wayne Pivac is gone from Wales, and Warren Gatland is in. We'll start on the Eddie Jones one, Birch. First up, are you surprised?
Look, I think pre-November internationals, I would never have bet that Eddie Jones would be gone, because he seemed to have the full confidence of the RFU. He survived 2 reviews already, and it's the fact that he's such a good World Cup record. I think everybody was hoping, or everyone was believing that he'd be there. But November went really bad for them in terms of how they played. Losing to Argentina for the first time, come back against New Zealand, but even at the end when they decided not to go for the win, that seemed to piss off some of the fans. Booing and Twickenham, and then his from a non-rugby point of view, his PR advisor, making a comment on a comment section of the Times about the RFU CEO Sweeney being a leak. And then there was lots of talk about maybe bullying claims staff wise and people leaving, etc. It's just all momentum turned on him. So I suppose and most worrying from an RFU point of view, ticket sales for Six Nations home games were slow. So that probably, the financial aspect of it, probably turned the tide against him. But I think he's going to go to a World Cup with somebody as a consultant, and I think he'll add value there. He is a very good coach, but he does seem to have got caught. Like, he's talking about this attacking game where numbers on your shirts are irrelevant, and they're trying to develop that. I don't know if that's even necessary to get to that level. I think England have enough good players to play. They can play their own way, but something slightly similar has been what's done before, rather than try and reinvent the game. And they got so far stuck trying to chase what he wants to do that the performances were poor, and it looked like they had no attacking philosophy at all. So it just shows Wayne Pivac and Eddie Jones probably thought they were going to the World Cup, and they just needed 2 really bad Novembers to steal their fate.
Sean, it feels as this is probably more than a results decision. It feels like if Eddie Jones was having, if he had the exact same results as he had over the last few weeks, and the relationships were better with the RFU and the staff and possibly even the players, we don't really know that, but it feels like he might have survived it. But in the last 10 days or so, once the game's finished, there have just been so many leaks and rumors about the relationships with, as Birch was saying, with Bill Sweeney, the CEO, that it kind of feels like this is as much a decision about off-field stuff as it is on the pitch.
Yeah, and I suppose, look, Birch touched on a few kind of big aspects there in terms of the financial implications. Booing towards the back end of the autumn internationals, the turnover of staff. Like I like Eddie Jones for a few reasons, but then not that I'd say I can't stand him, but I find him utterly bizarre then in other areas where, like Bert said, the number on your back type game plan didn't really make sense to me. His turnover with the coaching staff over the last number of years, like, is there a clear coaching philosophy pathway with the coaches you have in place that your players are working under? Because it seems like every time they came into a new camp, there was a forwards coach gone, a backs coach gone, a strength and conditioning coach gone, which over time will build a sense of, I suppose, indecision with what he wants to try and achieve with the players. So I think the biggest thing that probably led to his downfall was his relationship with the RFU, and this review process that took place, where they supposedly, don't know for certain, touch base with players who've been in and out of camp, not just the season guys who've been in there and been his lieutenants over the last number of seasons. So I'd say a combination of factors really have led to that. Now, I am surprised 10 months out from a World Cup, with his, I suppose, reputation of doing so well at World Cups. It'll be interesting to see how this plays out over the next few months and who comes in. And it'll be very interesting to see.
Yeah, I just think for Sean's obviously going through his badges and things like that, but the Eddie Jones case study in terms of building relationships with the media. So his relationship with the media was gone toxic. They were after him for a while. And that's some of that's his own fault for being a smart ass and being, quite rude to them in press conferences and in Penny Hill where they train. So the media, he didn't get that right. Then his comment was, "I don't care what the fans think." After a poor defeat in Twickenham isn't a smart move, from a smart guy. And then, as I said, being able to manage to the RFU committee. He obviously, I think he's a bit shocked from what the Telegraph a good piece on it today, the last 48 hours of Eddie Jones, but I think he's always been able to convince him in those reviews that he has the Midas touch. And he's very data driven, but obviously that wears out. And you think back to 2019 when they got to the World Cup final, his support staff, Scott Wisemantle, top class coach, now with Australia, Steve Bortwick, probably going to succeed. Eddie, John Mitchell was there as well. You look at his coaching staff now, the Cockerell is obviously experienced. Proudfoot, there's big doubts about his ability, even though he won a World Cup with South Africa. But I mean, the cattle they have there, I think it was the cattle rather than the coaching, for in terms of that scrum dominance. And then the other lads are all kind of rugby league guys who seem to just float in and out. So Eddie probably overvalued his own coaching ability and his own knowledge, which is phenomenal. And the quality of his assistants has got worse, as Sean has said.
And Burson, like, one of the big arguments against sacking Eddie that I've seen over the last couple of days is obviously just pointing at his World Cup record, where he's been there and done it with Australia, South Africa, Japan, England, not necessarily winning it, but at the very least making big runs or surprising runs through the tournament. But at the same time, though, if you're a team like England who have the greater resources than anyone in the world, like up there with the biggest playing populations, surely a team like England should be able to compete at a World Cup without sacrificing the 4 years in between. I could understand the argument if you are a smaller nation, maybe someone like Wales, who don't have the resources and have overachieved maybe at World Cups down the years. But if you're England, surely you can have your cake and eat it in that circumstance.
Yeah, look, I think Eddie Jones, his shelf life is probably max 4 years. I visited Japan after the 2015 World Cup, and Jamie Joseph came in, and obviously Jamie Joseph understood the Japanese side. Kevin played there and played for them actually, and Tony Brown, and the feeling was, and the players apparently told the Japanese Rugby Union that if Eddie stayed on after the World Cup, even though they were obviously beat South Africa in Brighton, and it was a good World Cup for them, historic World Cup in some ways, that a lot of them are going to retire, and because of the intensity of camp, the way he trained them, the way he coached them. I think he's brilliant at getting a bounce out of teams But I think there's a shelf life there. You know what I mean? And maybe a little bit of a similarity to the Joe Schmidt era in Ireland, where it was just, you know, one block too long or 1 year too long from an Irish point of view. And he's just so intense. I mean, the stories about him, you know, sending emails to staff at 3 o'clock in the morning, wanting a response by 6. You know, he is a very unique character, and maybe for players' point of view, he's just blowing their head. And the RFU absolutely should be competing every year. You know what I mean? There's no reason to hide stuff. Like this idea that, okay, he might have been changing their attack, but they certainly weren't hiding stuff. He would have known going into November, like there was a couple of games he needed to perform in, and you know, I don't think that's believable that you're just playing these test matches for the sake of playing them to have a secret plan come out in France. I just think he wasn't able to get the reaction out of players that he had been in the past, and once that finishes, you're dead.
And Sean, then moving to Wales, Wayne Pivac got the bullet the day before Eddie did. Warren Gatland is coming back in. This one probably wasn't as surprising as Eddie Jones, and it probably seems that this is very much just a straight rugby results decision.
Yeah, look, I had written on my notes here, not as big of a surprise as Eddie Jones, because bottom line, you cannot lose at home to Georgia and Italy in Autumn Nations campaign. Again, some similarities to Eddie Jones, where he was quoted saying, you know, building ahead for the 2027 World Cup, and even tying in with Eddie again. I heard Keith Wood on the radio, was either this morning or yesterday, talking about, he spoke to Philip Brown about the importance of the Six Nations, where these two coaches seem to see that as a building block towards a World Cup, whereas it's the bread and butter of the unions. And from my own point of view, like massive historical and cultural significance goes with the Six Nations. You know, coaches, I just find it bizarre that they use it as you know, semi warm-up kind of series to get ready for a World Cup. So again, look, I think Wales are probably reaping the Welsh region kind of falling down system in the last 4, 5, 6 years, where, you know, players aren't really coming through. They had a golden generation where it just hasn't been built on really. So Pivac, not as surprising to see him go, and Return of the King, Warren comes back in. So that'll be a very juicy first up game in the Six Nations, where Ireland travel to Wales for the opening game.
Yeah, it certainly will. And Birch, like, probably maybe the only surprise in this is possibly Warren Gatland, because I think there was talk last week that he was being eyed up as Eddie's successor at England in the short term to bring him to a World Cup. But you do expect there to be a bounce with Gatland coming back into Wales, but at the same time, it's a big gamble from his point of view, because that's not as good a squad of players as he had in 2019.
Yeah, look, the rumor is that he stalled Wales to see if England were going to come for him. I mean, the England job's a far better job than the Welsh job. One, it's probably double the salary, maybe triple. Two, you've got, like, look at England are going to bounce. England are way better than they are at the moment. Whereas are Wales way better? Yeah, sure. Under Gatland, it's hard to see them lose to Italy or Georgia at home, to be honest. So I think there will be an improvement, but certainly I do think it's a gamble for Gatland, because that golden generation, you know, that he built a team around, are either finishing or on their last legs. You know, well, that's harsh. Faletau is still playing, you know, incredibly well. But they really, like, this is the World Cup. This is the end. Like, a lot of them, you felt the last World Cup was their kind of peak time. Plus, he's going back in there without Edwards, without McBride, without Howley, who were key to Gatland. I mean, Gatland doesn't do a huge amount of coaching. He's very much top of the building type guy, and that's really important as well. But he's going to have to take on, obviously. In fairness, at least he knows, you know, Stephen Jones, getting Jenkins, he's coached them, so that's a help. But yeah, it is a bit of a gamble for Gatland. But I think he went back to the Chiefs. It didn't really go as well as he would have liked. He's not a front runner for the All Blacks job. He gets to come back to Wales and go back to another World Cup, and if he can obviously do something with them, he'll take the Six Nations seriously for sure. But yeah, I think it's a tough gig. I don't see the squad, the depth there that was in the past, you know. And they did a deal that apparently it's signed. So the WRU and the 4 regions did a deal this week. It has to be signed off on, but agreed in principle funding, because you're starting to see, you know, Will Rowlands is signed for Racing. Players were starting to leave because they had no contract offers. But the 60 cap rule may end up getting scrapped, and that could be a good thing for Wales, because their best players go get paid somewhere else. And you know, they can then hopefully develop some new talents. But it's not a straightforward gig. I mean, I can see why Gatland was waiting to see what was going to happen with England, if he was going to get the job there first.
Yeah, and like, it is a risk, Sean, because like his reputation at the moment in Wales is, you know, he is God. He is a legend with what he's done for those 10 years or so when he was previously there. But if things go badly wrong here over the next year or so, it's a big hit to a legacy, isn't it?
Yeah, it will be, but I think he has enough credit in the bank with the union, with the public. Like Bert said, they still have quality players, maybe 1 to 15, but it's outside that where they need to try and, you know, develop some players pretty quickly leading into the Six Nations and then into the summer and then into the World Cup. But it is a big risk, because he's not coming back in to where that golden generation are all in their mid to late 20s. So it'll be tough. It'll be tough for him. But again, he seems to get the best out of the players that he can, especially when he was working in Wales. So, but it would be a big concern, like Bert said, about you know, no Robin McBride, no Sean Edwards, which is huge. You know, these types of guys were driving the culture, the standard of play that got them such success over those years. So it'll be very interesting. Number one, does he keep those, like Bert says, Stephen Jones and getting Jenkins on? So yeah, look, it's a big risk, but he seems to get the best out of those players.
Just last one on Wales, Birch, on Wayne Pivac himself. Like, obviously he's someone who had great success at the Scarlets and won a Pro 12 with them and played some wonderful rugby. Did he find himself just in the wrong gig at the wrong time with Wales? Like, do you see him coming back onto our radars in the not so distant future with a different team?
Yeah, look, I think he's a good coach. I do think it was a poison chalice. Coming in, obviously, look, let's not forget they got to a World Cup semi-final, and there was very little underneath that. They haven't had a good under-20s team for a while. Also, there's the parochial issue in Welsh rugby. So when he got the job, the other 3 regions players felt he's going to be biased towards the Scarlets players. You know, so Wales historically have had issues when a coach has come from internally. So he had that. Then he obviously wanted to bring the Scarlets way to Welsh rugby, and it takes a while to get international teams. Ireland have obviously got to that level now where they can play an attractive brand, but it was bringing Wales from a very defense oriented kick chase game into the Scarlets type game, which didn't really work at the start. There was teething problems with that, high turnover of players, and then he went kind of to a kicking game. So he went away from his philosophy to try and save his job, which, look, it's understandable, you know. But I just think politically he came in there at a time when the WRU are shambles as an organization, probably the worst organization I've ever seen close up. You wouldn't believe some of the stuff that I've seen him said in meetings. So and Gatland, in fairness to him, tried to get involved in the Welsh politics for the first few years, and then he realized that they wouldn't do anything he wanted anyway. So he pulled away and he just saw, like, he became like a consultant coach in terms of the international coaching group at this part of the building in the Vale. And, you know, they saw themselves as their own entity. And Wayne, in fairness, didn't have the probably credibility to do that. He had to get involved in the politics. And once you get involved in the politics, you know, you're screwed, because there's not enough clarity of vision. There's not enough people in there who understand high performance. So he got dragged into all the political infighting between the amateur clubs, the regions, the union, and then he was dead. He was dead. It's just when he got chopped. So I think he will be a good coach. And look, there's going to be loads of coaching good jobs available. And what he did with the Scarlets and his experience now in international rugby will be enough for him, I think, to get a decent job somewhere.
it is interesting, and on Ronan O'Gara, for example, signing the new contract at La Rochelle, bringing him up to 2027, like 2027 being the specific number end of the next World Cup cycle. Like, it is interesting, Sean, that the club game now for a while has started to follow on with the World Cup cycles, and everyone is kind of working along that same path, isn't it?
Yeah, it's the buzz phrase at the moment, World Cup cycle. I suppose, look, Rodgers' name was highly touted in that discussion for the English job. He kind of mentioned it himself as well in a few press interviews. So, but not too surprised he stayed on there. He's an incredible squad, backroom coaching team, West Coast of France, Heineken Cup or Champions Cup winners. So he seems pretty settled there. But look, coming off the back of that, it's a long way away, 2027. So look, he seems he's doing incredibly well, seems well settled. So it will be, I suppose, a discussion maybe in 2025, 26 to see when those rumor mills start up again in terms of where he might end up.
Yeah, and Birch, obviously, like, he's a young man at the same time. He isn't in coaching particularly long. He can sit back and tip along and do some good things at the club game. He doesn't need to be in a rush to get into Test rugby, really, does he?
No, he doesn't. Look, I would be shocked if there wasn't a clause in there for an international team or a buyout fee written in. But it's a real sign of. It fits lovely with what La Rochelle have done. They've had the same president for, I think, 23 years. I think they've only had 4 or 5 head coaches over that period. You know, it's a club that put a lot of value on cohesion and sticking with the right people. And, you know, they've been very good to Roger's been very good for them. And it just gives them security now. You know, look, if it's not England, it's someone else is going to be coming after him.
Yeah.
You know, if any club or country needs a coach, he'll be on a short list at the moment. And now it'll hopefully get him off those short lists. And, you know, from a La Rochelle point of view, they can start to plan retention, recruitment, again over the next couple of years. But I would be shocked if he doesn't have a way out if he wants, you know, if the dream job comes along. But look, getting guys like O'Gara who can bring success to a club, it's such a minefield. It's very smart by La Rochelle, and I'd say it was well negotiated by Ronan or his agent as well.
Last bit on coaching, because it's rare we be dominated so much by this kind of coaching news. A few rumors from Australia this morning, Birch, that Leinster are keeping tabs on Scott Robertson, trying to chat to him about coming in after Stuart Lancaster during the summer. Have you heard anything on that?
No, I would be shocked, to be honest, because Leo, my understanding is Leo will stay. And I think Robertson, I don't know, like he's probably, unless the World Cup goes brilliantly for the All Blacks, I'd say he could be the next All Black coach, which is, you know, he's gone for it last time. He's on the record. I don't know if he'd come to Europe for. The Leinster job is a phenomenal job. You know, it's one of the most attractive, probably the most attractive club job in Europe. But I would say international rugby is where he'll end up next, to be honest.
We'll go on to the Champions Cup now. So, in terms of the format, we're still on this 2 large pools of 12 splintered off into the little kind of mini fixture pods of home and away. South Africans in the mix now too as well, which kind of makes it interesting. But Sean, in terms of the general favourites for the tournament, are we still just looking at the usuals of Leinster, Racing, Toulouse, probably La Rochelle, and a couple of the big England hitters as well?
Yeah, probably it's you wouldn't be able to look too far outside of those 4 or 5 teams. French teams are still going to be incredibly strong. Racing and Leinster, 2 heavy hitters going up against it this weekend. Munster, Toulouse. Look, the format is still a bit higgledy-piggledy in my view. I wish it would potentially go back to the old format. You're probably not going to be looking too far outside of those. I saw an interesting with the launch of the Heineken Cup, or I keep calling it Heineken Cup, apologies, Champions Cup a couple of weeks ago, where they were asking, or whoever the reps were from each team, who they thought were going to win, and they couldn't say their own club. So, and a lot of them were coming up with Leinster. I don't know whether that's trying to lure them into a false sense of overconfidence, but yeah, look, you still have those 4 or 5 big heavy hitters that'll be thereabouts come the business end of it.
Yeah, I think ultimately, if someone's asking you to pick a winner and you say Leinster, and even if you're wrong, you're not going to be wrong by much ultimately. Like, I mean, it's a fairly safe guess. But Sean, just in terms of the near misses over the last few years, so losing the final last year, semi-final year before, and final in 2019 as well. Like, how much have they hurt inside in the squad over the last few years?
Yeah, look, it's been, I suppose it's the amount of trying to recover from the loss leading into the next year, and you're driving everything again, and you're building back towards trying to get back to a final and get the job done. And it just didn't happen. I think last year was a real killer for that group, because we just had felt that over the last 2 or 3 years, with the loss in the final 2019, the semi, that getting back then again to the final was it was going to happen. But look, there's some really, really good leaders and characters in that squad that managed to, I suppose, regroup everybody year on year. You know, I think Johnny, Gary Ringrose, Robbie Henshaw, James Ryan, these type of guys managed to get the squad back focused to have another serious crack year on year. So the hunger's there. They want to get back, especially with, I suppose, Stuart moving on this year. Leo, I don't know what his story is. So, and the talent is there again, which is a great thing. So it's not as if we're losing players. It's a strong squad again to make a serious crack at it.
And Birch, then Leinster and Racing to kick us off on the opening weekend. I mean, that's as good a fixture you could be hoping for, even though it's an early game on Saturday afternoon. I've never really been a fan of those early Saturday afternoon ones, but it's an absolute blockbuster. And we have the nice little Stuart Lancaster subplot running along with it as well.
Yeah, big game. Both teams in great form. Obviously, Leinster unbeaten in the URC and coming on the back of their most impressive performance for a long time, coming back against Ulster with a man down. Racing too. Racing sent a second string to Toulon, and everyone expected it to be a formality. Toulon will win, and Racing got the win. There seems to be a real good team ethos, team spirit there at the moment, and it looks like they, like Leinster, want to send their coaching team out on a high. And they've been good in Europe. You know, they probably should have had one trophy already, and they have the squad to do things there. Obviously the Stuart side, obviously going there next year makes it interesting as well. But El Harv is a big advantage. The fact the game's not in the stadium, where Racing usually play.
Big advantage for Leinster, do you mean?
In the arena, yeah, it's a big advantage for Leinster. Yeah, there won't be a huge crowd there. It's a lovely stadium, soccer stadium. We played there with Grenoble against Stade Francais when they moved the game. But I think Leinster, it's a different type of game, the way Leinster played in the top 14, and I think Leinster will be good enough to get a win away from home. But obviously only four matches. It's important you start fast.
How much of that belief in Leinster this weekend comes down to whether or not Johnny Sexton and Tyke Furlong are fit to play, or even if both are out, would you still give Leinster a really, really strong chance?
I don't think Johnny will be back, but while Ross is a very capable understudy, I think it'd be pretty important Tyke comes back, even though obviously Leinster have good depth there. But I think Ross has turned a corner again. A little bit of a dip last year at the end of the year, but like, you want a player like him, you know, in those big games who has that character. But yeah, it's a tough ask. It'd be interesting if they pick Finn Russell. They've been very good without him the last few weeks. They're 5 in a row in terms of wins. So it's just, yeah, it's a great opportunity for Leinster to see Leinster against a team who have a lot of X factor and a lot of power. We're seeing a little bit more in the URC, obviously the Sharks game, but this is a different kettle of fish.
And the comeback win, Sean, at the weekend against Ulster, even before it, they were obviously in an excellent position in the URC, but to still have that 100% record and have a nice little 9-point lead at the top of the URC. It's given them scope now to go absolutely hell for leather across these next 2 games.
Yeah, look, I think obviously with losing Cian Healy early to that red card at the weekend, and the level of performance, especially post half time, was some of the best stuff I've seen Leinster play in a number of years. Gary Ringrose was outstanding. So again, that will breed a lot of confidence heading into this weekend. In terms of this Racing and Leinster game, it'll be very interesting to see, and Birch mentioned it about the styles of play. I kind of revert back to, we'll say, Leinster and Toulouse last year, where Leinster just tore them apart with the speed of play, front football, different lines of running. And I think Racing are probably a bit more better suited to cope with that than at Toulouse. So I think it's going to be an outstanding game. I like Lauren Travers, the Racing coach. They have a squad packed full of really dynamic players. So, and going back to your point about, Ross Byrne, I think he has, he's back in form again this season. I was delighted to see him come on and kick that penalty for Ireland. Yeah, look, Tadhg Furlong will be a big loss. We'd have a bit of depth there, but again, you want your strongest pack / sub forwards to be able to compete with a power-based team like Racing.
Moving on then to Sunday, Munster and Toulouse. Like you mentioned Toulouse there, Sean, about how they obviously got hockeyed by Leinster in the semi-final, just with the speed at which Leinster were moving them around the pitch. But on this game in particular, like just on Munster, got things back on track over the last few weeks, and it's starting to feel like they're kind of moving back towards to being a more consistent team and just getting those performances together on a weekly basis. Yeah,
no, it's been huge, and like the manner of their win in Edinburgh. Look, Munster don't have many jokers left to play in the URC. They need to start accumulating points, and that Edinburgh fixture looked like a difficult one on paper. Obviously, it started poorly, but then it was just one-way traffic, and they made Edinburgh look like a very average side at the end. Which, to be fair, they're not really. They're a decent, top middle of the table URC team,
and they were close to Edinburgh. Were close to full strength as well.
Yeah, they were. There's still a question mark around their mental ability to stay in games, and I think that'll be the frustrating thing for my player, the way they fell away. It's a little bit like Ulster going up the road after the RDS. You have a team who can play, but do they have the capacity to stay in the fight when things get tough? And Edinburgh didn't. But credit to Munster, they play real variety. The Mike Prendergast attack is starting to click. There's a lot of movement off the ball. There's a lot of work off the wings from both wingers to create overloads. Frisch is able to step up as a first receiver, which gives him a 2. And yeah, their lines of running are better, and they're asking questions to defenders, and which, to be honest, over the last couple of years they weren't really great at. They were quite one-dimensional. So it's positive, but I mean, there's a big difference between Edinburgh and Toulouse, so this is another test. I hope I'm down there on Sunday. I hope it's just one of those brilliant Champions Cup days that Munster have played a huge role in. I hope they get a big crowd, big atmosphere, and we witness a great game.
And obviously the stakes are obviously massive then as well, Sean, with just the fact that it's Toulouse in the Champions Cup. But even normally, just the way the fixtures fall, normally Munster would love a home, their big home game to be the last one where they can build into it. Whereas having to go to Toulouse in round 4, you absolutely don't want to be having to go to France needing to pick up a result. So it puts even more of an emphasis on winning this weekend, just to get up on the board and up and running nice and early.
Yeah, look, and I suppose the way that the tournament is set up as well, minimum you need to be winning your matches at home. So I suppose just touching on a few of the points Birch made, definitely can see Munster's new game plan taking shape, and I suppose that's tying in as well to kind of consistency around selection, which they didn't really have at the start of the year for, I suppose, the emerging Ireland tour injuries and so on. So what I'm liking as well is that they're building phases. You got players running onto the ball in motion. You You got guys taking their time on off 10 when they go out the back. It's all looks a lot more fluid at the moment. So no, I have written down they need to start better. They won't get away with that type of start they had against Edinburgh at the weekend. Toulouse are just too good, too much quality. Dupont is back. He got released from that suspension early. Marchand, Boy, Cross, Elstad, Jaminet, Jalanche, Ntamak. They have quality players across their team. So they will need to start well. Look after the ruck. Toulouse will go quite hard at the ruck. Was looking to try and implement that game plan, like Birch said, by overloading, bringing wingers after wing centres, working hard to create that extra man and try and take their chances.
And look, even just if it's anything like the last two meetings between the two sides, like we're surely in for a decent game. Obviously the quarterfinal last year that went to the penalty kicks, but even also their last 16 meeting the year before in Thomond Park, like that was an absolute belter as well. They're two sides who obviously bring out the best in each other.
Yeah, look, it's such a great fixture on paper, such pedigree with both clubs. And Toulouse, I think, Birch will probably attest to this, that they buy into the Heineken Cup every single year. It means so much to them. So massive history behind the fixture. I presume Thomond Park is going to be full, big atmosphere. And like I said, Munster will look and need to get off to a good start in this competition by trying to get a win at home.
Last call on this game, Birch, just on Dupont. Sean mentioned it there that he got off early from the suspension. What are your thoughts on that tackle on Cheslin Kobe being reduced from mid-range kind of entry point to the low range, and that's why he had it?
I think he was lucky, to be honest. I think it was a pretty dangerous collision in the air, and look, there's a lot of frustration amongst players and coaches around consistency of action. Even I think that shouldn't be low range. He should still be banned.
If your name isn't Antoine Dupont, is that mid range or low range?
That's certainly the feeling, but it is very difficult to know how you're going to do in those hearings. You know what I mean? And even there's another, the incident the weekend with James Lowe against Cooney. I'd love World Rugby. I'd love for kind of controversial incidents which we're not clear upon, for World Rugby maybe to do a wrap every month and just actually give a definition of what's legal, illegal, and from the DuPont point of view, just some consistency in those, because I've seen those suspensions upheld.
Have you been in many of those hearings before, Sean?
Disciplinary hearing?
Yeah.
No, but
I was trying to go through my head. Do I remember any big Sean Cronin red cards?
I made a high tackle against Jack Nowell in Exeter 4 or 5 years ago, which probably would be a red now. I got sin binned. So yeah, look, Dupont's one was beyond reckless. I thought. I'm very surprised after getting that player could have broken his neck, easily. So the James Lowe one, like you touched on there, Birch, very tight. Is his arm tucked against his chest? Is he pushing out on the contact? But like you said, a very, very good point about trying to get clarity from World Rugby on feedback on potential decisions that are made in game would be another way of not only educating the public or the rugby public, but I suppose trying to teach players going forward. Yeah,
so just on James Lowe, I'm not saying that he should be banned or that. I know there's a natural instinct when you protect yourself when you carry, but I would love to know what World Rugby feel from a refereeing point of view about when that leads to, obviously, head contact with your forearm. Like I said, I don't know, and I was co-com on it. I didn't know whether it should be red or not. You know what I mean? And that's kind of, and the game is so difficult to referee. Like we're seeing, things we've never seen before or don't see very often starting to happen because the game is so fast. Ball and play time is so high. There's a lot of pressure on referees, and I think from an overall rugby fans experience point of view, just to kind of to get some clarity, and then everyone could just follow that,
Yeah, and just to last couple of points before we finish up. So obviously you mentioned John Cooney. He looks like he's almost certainly going to be out for Ulster this weekend. It would be hard to see him playing after that collision he had with James Lowe. But also Ian Henderson had to have a HIA during that game. Tom Stewart as well. Like they're counting up the cost of that defeat to Leinster, even aside from the emotional toil of losing the game.
Me? Yeah, sorry.
Let's take that one. Sorry, I didn't throw a name in there.
You're grand.
My word count is up.
Yeah, look, a combination of both injuries and I suppose having to move on quickly from the hurt of that defeat at the RDS. And then you're putting into the mix there a very, very physical Sale team. John O'Ross, the Curry brothers, Tuolagi, Oosthuizen, Johnny Hill, like they have an outstanding squad of players both in the forward pack and backline that are not only physical, powerful. So, that injury toll as well will have a big, I suppose, say on the level of performance that they can bring to that game away from home as well. It's got to be tough for Ulster. But it's again trying to move on from the hurt of that loss as well from the RDS and get the minds focused of having another really, really good campaign in Europe.
Yeah, and Birch, just given the fact that it's falling straight after that game against Leinster, like if they were to go out and have that hangover, which we saw them have last year after big defeats, if they were to follow up and have it again this year, you're in the middle of a really, really difficult run of games, like La Rochelle coming, Connacht before Christmas, more derbies after that as well. They have to play Munster. Like they're in the middle of a very tough run of fixtures. So you can't be getting down on yourself too early in them.
No, and look, it is great to have the European Cup to bounce back, to get it out of your system. But I think that defeat is going to be, it could be more significant than a normal run of the mill. You lose away from home in the URC. I think mentally Leinster may have scarred them, and it's going to be really interesting to see how they bounce back if they do. You know what I mean? And I thought, obviously if Cooney's out, Billy Burns, he has to take some blame for the lack of control they showed. With the wind, with a man advantage, Leinster were getting dominance at the breakdown. Porter obviously was a huge benefactor of that, but they were playing in the wrong area of the field when they just needed to play some territory. And he, in fairness to him, he seemed to have picked up a knock early. So if he's out, Madigan is out, the Jake Flannery is up there, and he's a young player, but it's a lot of pressure. And Sale, people are screaming about Steve Borthwick, and obviously he's done a great job. But Sanderson is someone who will be in the pot for that England job as well, and he's done a great job in Sale with what he took over from Steve Diamond. I played with him there. He's a good fella, and he's obviously come from through the Saracens way. So this is a tough game for Ulster, but more importantly, not tactics. It's actually bouncing back and showing that resilience that Dan will be very worried about. I think Dan's put a lot of work into this team. And if they lose this weekend, given what they have to face later in this competition, it could be curtains. Yeah, it really is a big one. Very quickly at the end, Connacht and Newcastle. It's Challenge Cup, unfortunately, for Connacht this season rather than Champions Cup. And Sean, it looks like they're probably not going all out to win it. They've, I think it was Cully Tucker yesterday was talking about how they'll be resting a lot of the Ireland internationals, using this as one of the games. Like, you've obviously had Challenge Cup runs with Connacht down the years as well. Do you think this is the ideal opportunity for them to target a trophy, or there's obviously a real difficult balance to be had there, isn't there?
Yeah, well, I suppose back in my time, we had serious runs at the Challenge Cup because we were at the other end of the table, unfortunately, in the league. But I think going back to where Connacht had an unbelievably tough opening to the season, they've got a lot of that, under their belt. They've had some really good results recently, and the fixture list isn't as tough, leading into Christmas and then post-Christmas. So I'd say they're more targeting the URC, trying to build a bit of stability there, try and build on results, and maybe look to, I suppose, expose some younger guys, some less experienced guys with this level of rugby in the Challenge Cup. Reading into what Cully Tucker has kind of alluded to in terms of their approach, that's probably the focus for them. Build on the URC, get some guys some game time in the Challenge Cup, and that's where they probably see the more benefit route of going down.
Birch, would you agree? Do you think they have just about enough of a sniff of kind of URC playoffs that it's worth sticking with?
Yeah, I don't think the Challenge Cup is winnable for Connacht. I think once it gets to the knockout stages, you're going to run into some big teams, and I think they should just target one competition, and that's the URC, to get themselves back into the Champions Cup if they can. So I think that's a smart strategy.
All right, we'll wrap it up there. So Birch, you're at Thomond Park on Sunday, yeah?
Yeah, looking forward to it. RTÉ back with Champions Cup, so hopefully we get a great game and a big crowd.
Yeah, we're all looking forward to that. RT2 on Sunday afternoon, Munster.
And Neil, sorry, if anyone wants to see some serious rugby, they can come down to Templeville Road at 2:30 on Saturday to see St. Mary's against Highfield. So just put that out there.
I will allow you say that, even though I'm a Terranure man. I will just.
Oh my God, that's even worse.
But no, very best of luck with that. And just a reminder as well. So as Birch said, Sunday afternoon. Look, we're clearing up. We're putting it on. We're doing the Munster match on Sunday, so people have a chance to go watch St. Mary's on Saturday afternoon. But we also have commentary on RTÉ Radio 1 of Munster and Toulouse, and commentary as well of Ulster and the Sale Sharks on Sunday as well. But Sean, Birch, thanks a million for joining us. Enjoy the games of the weekend, and we'll speak to you soon.